Yo, literature enthusiasts, I'm back, you're back, listening, I'm talking. Hello, welcome back. We are here to talk about a few things today. A couple of things. A few things. Anyways, so let's talk. First of all, welcome back. Last week we talked a little overview about the Ranger's Apprentice series. I went a little bit into books 1 and 3, but I kind of want to talk about books 1 through 6. So there will be spoilers. If you don't want to get spoiled, I'm sorry. Just leave a like and leave. If you do want to get spoiled, dope. Stick around. Secondly, I wanted to start off by saying, real quick, before we do anything else, there's a YouTuber that I follow called Jack Close. Great actual video producer, videographer, and all that stuff. His videos are so high quality. He just made a quick 6-minute video on why reading fiction is really good. I highly implore you to go check it out. It basically summarized how I feel about reading fiction, and I think he just does a good job of introducing the topic. He doesn't go super in depth or whatever it is on how fiction affects the brain or whatever. It's just a quick 6-minute synopsis. Great listen. Go check it out. I'll leave it in the description also. Arish, remember to leave post editing. Arish, remember to leave this in the description, and then cut this out of the video. Yes. Okay. So what are we talking about today? Books, as usual. Welcome back to the archives. We are not in the nook, the reading nook. We are in the reading desk here today because it is so noisy outside. It is so noisy outside. Oh my word, it's noisy. And so hopefully this is a better setting for today until the mic comes in. I have a new mic coming in. Fingers crossed it works. The one I had, the old one I had, looked like a scam. So I got to return it, which is dope. Yeah, but I have a new one coming in, so hopefully that one works. But what we are starting with actually is not what I've read. It's what I'm planning to read. So I'm currently on, these are books 1 through 6, right? I've just finished book 7 and book 8. So I'm currently on book 9. And once I get through book 11, I'll do 7 through 11 with you guys. This is just 1 through 6. And I don't know when I'll be done with the other books. I don't read all that much, but I do read a lot. So, look out for that. Secondly, what am I reading after these books is what I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about, because I did get this one standalone, because first of all, I'm big on series. I usually read books that are in series versus standalones. I'm trying to get into more standalone books or one-off books so that I don't have to commit myself to a huge series every single time. I don't think this is part of a series, but it might just be her first book and the part of a series. So I'm not sure, but this is the Atlas 6, and I've heard it's very, very good. Very, very good. It's by Olivia Blake. I got it at a Barnes & Noble just a month or two ago. I wanted to read it, and so I thought I might as well get it then and then have it to read versus waiting, But yes, so I will be reading the Atlas 6. I also want to read the Seven Realms series, which is part of this one. I don't have the first book yet. I will get it before I start reading them. The Seven Realms series is my favorite series of all time, thus far in my life. It is by Cinda Williams-Chima, and she has written 3 amazing series in the Air Chronicles Seven Realms series and Shattered Realms series. And she's actually releasing her new book that's based around Nordic mythology. And if you know me, I devour Nordic mythology. And so that's coming out in November. So I want to read at least, and it has nothing to do with her previous books actually. So I'm debating if I want to just start from the beginning and go with her Air Chronicles books, which is her first series, or go to Seven Realms, which is her second series. I have one book in this series of each, but I'll let you know. Maybe I'll just read the first book in each one, and then we'll get her book in November, and then we'll talk about that. But that's one I want to read. Second is actually a series I read in middle school and high school, called the Redwall series. Now, Redwall is a weird series. It's basically about animal folk, straight up. We're gonna look it up real quick to tell you guys. Redwall series. And the weird thing about Redwall is that there is a chronological order to the books. It's just they didn't have like book 1, book 2, book 3 on the actual book, so you don't know unless you read them and fit the timeline in together, which was the weirdest thing to do as a middle schooler when you don't have half a brain, is reading books and like, oh cool, here's this book, okay, here's this book, why are none of the characters connected? Okay, here's book number 3, why does this look like this precludes book 2 but is a sequel to book 1 that I just read? So this time I'm actually going to look it up and read it in order, or whatever order they say the book should be in. Not shopping, I want images. Yeah, but it's a massive, like, I think it's roughly it's a 20 book series. So that's gonna be like a pick up 1 or 2, put them, and then put it away and go back in for the rest. It's written by Brian Jakes. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Jacqueus. Tell me how you'd pronounce Jakes. Could be Jacques. I'm thinking of the artist Jacques right now. But I'm pretty sure it's not Brian Jacques. So if it is, that'd be wild. But that's one I want to read for sure. And so those are a couple of books on the horizon that I want to read the rest of this year after we finish Ranger's Apprentice. And that's about it for the introduction. I will see you guys in a bit for the main part. Okay, let's discuss, talk, monologue, dialogue, converse about these books. So I touched on this a little bit in the first previous video about how John Flanagan kind of sets up his books. Now these 6 in particular have been set up with the generally a 2-book conclusion to whatever conflict arises in the previous book. So to start off, Ruins of Gorelon basically takes place in Arluen, and it's, you know, Will's story about him being the Ranger's apprentice. So the antagonist in the story is actually Morgrath, the most easily villainous name you could have put on any character. You give a villain or an antagonist a wrath or a morgue or like anything aggressive like that, he has to be evil. Shout out Morgoth. You know, if you've played Elden Ring, you know. Anyways, so Morgrath is the antagonist. Now he was basically like, I think he was an Arluen knight at one point, or like a baron or something, and he wanted to overthrow the king, so he amassed followers, and he amassed followers not of only humans, but of other races, like they're like basically orcs, but they're called wargles in this series. Basically like very brawny but weak-minded, a race of beast men that he could kind of control with his mind. This book should not have magic, so I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how. Okay. Anyways, so Morgrath is the antagonist who, back in, say, I think 5 or 6 years before the first book, he tried to overthrow the king, and he was stopped by a very famous ranger. And now he's back for revenge. As are all villains. They're back for revenge. And so, This is basically part one of Morgrath's revenge against Arluwen and how Will gets caught up in it. It's also a good setting up book for a lot of the characters. Will meets Halt, the ranger. He's Halt's apprentice. Will and the other four orphans he grew up with went in their respective battle, or their respective schools of study. You know, he went ranger, Horace went battle master, Jenny went to the chef, Alice went to the diplomatic services, and George went to the scribe services. So book one actually follows Will and Horace, who, if you remember, I think I mentioned this in the first video about how I feel like there are main characters, sub-main, and supporting characters. Horace is one of the sub-main characters, because you do see a good amount of Horace in the story. A lot of the stories are centered around Will and also Horace, and what they both bring to the table in terms of a team or whatever it is. But they hate each other early on in their years, because Horace would pick on Will. Horace is simple, Will is like more sarcastic and like brainy, and so Will would have the last quip, but Horace would have the last physical bout and things like that. So book one actually follows kind of, okay, well, how do they become friends? And there's a really nice like friendship making scene in here, which I think you guys will enjoy if you read the book. It's when they go hunting for a wild boar. It was a really cool kind of event, think of it as like a limited time event in the book where, you know, there's a wild boar, so everybody is like, oh, we want to go boar hunting, because back in their day, boar hunting was like how you, as a man, that was like your sport. So the king is ready to go, the baron is ready to go, the baron's battle master is ready to go. They're like, ooh, let's go, we're gonna go boar hunting. Actually, that's a lie. The king was not there, just the baron and the battle master. Horace was there, Halt and Will were there because they found the tracks of the boar, so they were boar hunting. So like that entire scene is actually really cool too. So this basically follows, like, you know, their first encounter, or Will's first like experience as a ranger, Horace's experience at the battle school and how he's bullied and things like that, and how he has a very genius natural prowess for, what's it called, for sword fighting. And so you kind of see that come about towards the end of the book. You kind of see their first, how they thwart Morgrath's first attempt at getting back at the king. So all that stuff is here, which is really fun, really nice. It's a good setup. I think this is a really good book one of a series. Now, book two takes what happened in book one, where they thwart Morgrath's initial revenge plan, but Morgrath isn't gone. So Morgrath as the antagonist is still there. But they introduce a couple of new characters. They introduce Evelyn, who is the maid of the king's daughter, the princess. And Will and Horace encounter her as they're trying to thwart another of Morgrath's main attempt at killing the king or whatever. They also introduce the Scandians. So it turns out that Morgrath actually enlisted the help of some Scandian mercenaries to try and help them get back at the king, because there was this whole like military plot and strategy that Will and Horace had to like thwart and all that stuff. So you actually get to meet my favorite Scandian, Eric, and then you actually get to meet Evelyn, who is a surprise character, also a pretty cool character. Not like she's not one of those kind of damsel in distress characters, which I appreciate, which I think is cool. And then you kind of, towards the end of it, the ending is actually really cool, and this is why I said I like how he introduces new conflicts as old ones wrap up, but they're not just plugged in, you know? So at the end of it, it's you get to see the genius swordsman prowess of Horus up against Morgrath. He actually fights Morgrath, which is cool. And then you on the other hand, so that's that conflict being wrapped up. But then on the other hand, you see Will and Evelyn being abducted and taken on a ship to Scandia. Exactly. So that's where the next conflict arises, is now they're on their own. What's going to happen to them? And I think the way Flanagan kind of set that up was actually really cool, because he didn't like do everything in one chapter, right? Like, fight happens, they get abducted, they're gone, end of story, right? It's kind of gradual, middle of the book towards the end of like how things are progressing, and you're like, oh shoot, something's about to happen, and then bam, it hits you, it happened. So that's book 2, I think. So book 1, Morgrath, book 2, Morgrath ends, and then book 2, Scandia starts. So then Scandia starts. Now, as we discussed, Scandia is basically a frozen land. It's very snowy. The men there are basically huge Scandinavian men. Their main form of, I guess, living is raiding. They get on their ships, they're sea wolves, so they get on their ships and they raid other cities, towns, other lands for their food, people, jewelry, money, all that stuff, bring it back to, and then bring it back home to Scandia. That's basically what they do. So Will and Evelyn get abducted by the same Scandians who Morgrath had initially enlisted to help him kill the king. Something happened and they said, no, we're not doing that, we're leaving. And then they took Will and Evelyn with them. So the half of the story is kind of how Will and Evelyn survive, which is in one form their wit and perseverance, in another form it's Eric's kind of compassion towards, these people aren't horrible people, we're not going to kill them, but he does take them back as slaves, because that's just the Scandian way. And then towards the later half, you see, as they're sold into slavery, Evelyn gets like the indoors maid job, which is fine. Will gets the outdoors labor job. And the worst thing about being outdoors is it's cold and it rains a lot and you're working around water. So you're constantly cold and wet. And they only give you rags as clothing. So that's just the worst possible situation for a slave to be in, because you basically die out there. And it turns out, and this is where this is probably like I would say one of the more adult themed books in the entire series is what happens here, because he talks about slavery and then he also talks about drugs. So the slave kind of the group in the book has its own internal hierarchy, where they're like, oh, I've been a slave longer and I've survived, so I own you, or I can direct you and I can command you. So what they do in order to control the younger, newer slaves is they, give them the really awful jobs, they make them really wet, really cold, and then they give them warm weed, which is the drug. Basically, it warms up your entire body and you get addicted to that warmth because it's so cold everywhere. And so the second half of the book is kind of how Will gets drugged. And, Evelyn's still trying to escape. Will wanted to try and escape, but once he got drugged, his mind went blank. All he would do is work and then wait for his next supply of warm weed and then work. So he's basically just like a husk at that point. And so the second half is kind of how does Evelyn step up and rescue both her and Will. And in that way, she has to wean him off it. he needs to get back into his old self, into his ranger ways, all that stuff. So that's a very like adult part of this book. On the flip side, when Halt and Horace in book 2 like realize that, oh my god, Will and Evelyn got abducted, they set out to Scandia to bring them back. And this is I think where they introduce one of the more comedic duos in Halt and Horace, because Halt, being a very old grizzly ranger, grumpy, he's very sarcastic, very cynical, very kind of like dry, low voice, all that stuff. And Horace is a very young, straightforward man, very by the book. He was raised as a warrior and as a knight who honors the code, so he's very just like, you do things legally, all that stuff. So they traveled together through a new country that they introduced, right? So we have Arluin and Scandia. Now they introduce a third country, Gallica. So they're traveling through Gallica together, and their interaction is just like some of the funniest interactions in my opinion, because it's just Horace being naive and gullible, and Halt feeding into that naivete and gullibility. It's really fun interaction. And then you also get to see a lot of kind of Horace's prowess in fighting. You know, Halt preys on Horace's skill and says, listen, the only way we're going to get through this country is if we make people understand who we are. So he sets Horace up as this magnificent knight of the oak leaf, dueling and beating everybody in his way. Excuse me. And so you see a little bit of relationship growth between Halt and Horace in terms of another mentor figure and a young person kind of growing and maturing. And this is probably one of my favorite books in the series, just because of, you know, you see Evelyn and Will's journey, the slavery issue, the drug issue, and how they get out of it. And on the other hand, you see Halt and Horace and their journey, which is not, it's just still pretty bad. It's still pretty bad because they come across a villain in Gallica who is basically, he just duels people that he knows he can win and beheads them and keeps them in his castle and all that stuff. It's very dark. This is probably the darkest, quote unquote, darkest book in the series, but it's still really good. Really, really good. But that's book 3, is, you know, Will and Evelyn escaping, Halt and Horace trying to get to Scandia. But as you know, book 3 starts the Scandian conflict. So then book 4, so it turns out that not all Scandians are bad, or in general, Scandians are not evil. But the issue is that they just have their own ways, right? And so book 4 is basically what happens when Halt, Horace, Will, and Evelyn meet in Scandia. Now, there's a couple of issues here. Issue number 1 is Will and Evelyn escaped, which means their successful escape now marks them as criminals in Scandia. So they come back, they could be executed. But what happens is Will and Evelyn come across a raiding party from a different race of people called the Temujai. Now the Temujai are very, are a very military and tactical race of people, and they're trying to invade Scandia. Evelyn and Will stumble upon that, and they're like, we can't just leave the Scandians to, you know, get overtaken. They like Eric. They like the crew that they were with. It's just, you know, they didn't really like being sold into slavery, but can't really help that. So then they go back and try and help. Same way, Halt and Horace, I think they meet up with Will and Evelyn before then, or they all meet up together at Scandia and they talk with Eric, and they talk with the Ober Jarl, who is their king, Ragna. And he says basically, look, these people will kill you. Done deal. You will not be able to defend yourself against them. They will outmaneuver you in 5 different ways and you will die. Unless you let us help you. And if you let us help you, you have to let Will and Evelyn go. That's the deal. So, the Scandians understand the prowess of a ranger. The ranger is a tactician. The ranger is an analyst, a strategist. All they can do is put their trust in Halt and Will and Horse and Evelyn. So this book is basically Halt and the party teaming up with the Scandians against the Temujai. And it's actually kind of cool, the ideas that they come up with to battle the Temujai and outsmart them and all that stuff. Really cool book. And it once again goes back into a more lighthearted, more like upbeat theme. It's not as dark as Icebound Land or book 3. So book 4 is it's like a war book. Like, this is a war. How are we getting out of it? And then it ends with, oh yay, everybody's gonna go back to their homelands and all that stuff. Very, very, very good ending. There's not really a conflict here that leads into the next one. So what John Flanagan does is he time skips. We love time skips, but it did not really come with any power-ups. Basically, between book 4 and book 5, Will is now a full-fledged ranger. He was assigned to his own fief to look after. And as soon as he gets there, he meets the Baron and the Battle Master. He realizes that they're kind of soft, or they've gotten soft because they've gotten soft and complacent. And so, he has to kind of figure out, okay, how am I gonna fix these guys? Because these guys aren't training properly. They're not really keeping their men in good shape, all that stuff. And so the book starts with actually Will showing his experience, even as a young person and new ranger, his experience in handling any issues that come about. And the first issue is a Scandian crew tries to raid the fief. This is after the events of book 4, which you'll see why that's an issue already. But Will kind of talks them out of it in his own way, which you'll enjoy as usual. And he basically promises them that the fief, or the castle, will feed them, give them ample supplies for their trip back to Scandia, because this is actually right at the end of the Scandian raiding season, because now there are going to be a lot of storms at sea to where they can't get back and they can't sail. So they were trying a last-ditch effort to raid something before they get back. Kind of blew up in their face, but since they met Will kind of tricked / pressured the Baron and the Battle Master to be like, yeah, sure, join us for a feast, even though we don't like you or don't know you, all that stuff. And then that's literally the first 25% of the book. The next 75 is actually Will being sent to the north, to Castle Massendo and Norgate Fief, because he heard rumors and he was assigned, or he was sent there by the Rangers to kind of figure out what the rumors are. The rumors are that the king or the Baron up there is ill. His son is awful and nobody likes him, and they think the son poisoned the father to get the throne. Then you also have the Baron's nephew, who everybody loves, and is a really cool dude, and they think he should be the Baron or the ruler and not the son. But what I will say is, in general, I think book 5 and 6 were the most boring to me, because once you once you kind of get halfway through the book, you're like, oh, that's what's happening. And you're like, I've read that storyline before. Which maybe you like it. I think it was still good. It was just a bit harder to get through. Also, I don't know why I got book 5 and book 6 from the library when I have book 6 over here. So, oh well. But the Sorcerer of the North is basically Will traveling to the north and trying to figure out who is this rumored sorcerer living in the woods, and why are people afraid of him. Like I said, there's no magic in this book or in this series, so there's a reason as to why people call him a sorcerer. And then it's also to get to the bottom of what's going on in Norgate Fief. And first Will goes up there, and they actually introduce a new character of Will, or a new kind of, what's it called? A new, bro, what's the word? Appearance? Let's just say they class changed Will, okay? Let's just say they class changed Will from, let me adjust this real quick, from ranger to jongler. So a jongler is basically their music, like a traveling musician. It's basically what he is. And so the premise is that he travels north as a jongler to gain everybody's trust, and as he's playing songs and shanties in the end, he'll listen in and have people tell him what's going on. And that class change carries through like the rest of this series, which is actually really cool. They in book 3 they introduce the idea of Horace kind of stepping into different knightly personas, and that will carry on for the rest of, and in certain parts in the rest of the series. They introduced Will as his jongler persona, not his ranger persona. I like persona better, but class change is just funny to me. It basically said, hey, we're taking your bow, here's your mandala. But that part was kind of cool and fun. The part that wasn't cool and fun is just kind of like, okay, I know where this is going. Can we get there, please? Please. So that was kind of, it was a bit tough to get through 5 and 6 because I already knew what was going on, and I kind of knew how it would end. And I don't know how much of that is, me and my super analytical type ABCDEF brain and predicting for 100%, is it alpha? 100% probability that what would happen happened, or it's just the fact that I read these already and so it just kind of came back to me. I'm kind of thinking it's the first one. You can tell me otherwise. But book 1 is him figuring out who the Sorcerer of the North is. Book 2, not book 1 and book 2, jeez, book 5 and book 6. Now, here's what I also wanted to talk about also a little bit, which I never got to really say, is they changed the cover art of the book from earlier, what's it called? From when the books first released to now in their new versions, which is the same versions, the cover art's different. But look how different these look, right? I personally really like, so most of the older designs have this whole embossed kind of feel to the top where it says Ranger's Apprentice, and then the image is down here with the white text and his name. The newer ones, as you've seen, have, the entire cover is the image, new image, kind of cooler image, bigger text, their own special kind of font, and all that stuff. So I'm going to try, and maybe in the next book when I get through all of them, I'll kind of put up what their old designs were versus their new designs, because I kind of want to just talk about how they're different and which ones I like more than others. but we'll talk about that then, and I'll figure out how to put that together. But anyways, book 6. Book 6, The Siege of Massendo. So basically, after book 5, Will figures out who the sorcerer is, but he's kind of in a bind. Why is he in a bind, you might ask? Well, in book 5 also, they sent a couple of reinforcements to Will. Now, the first reinforcement was actually his childhood friend, Alice, who was in the diplomatic services. She was going there undercover also to try and figure out what the issue is. And she gets caught. Well, she and Will kind of get caught. Will escapes. She doesn't. Because she's basically undercover as a different bear, like a princess from a different, like a neighboring fief here to visit or whatever, and trying to get to the bottom of things. So Will's in a bind. He's like, how do I get Alice out of there, out of captivity, properly, no one gets hurt? And as you can tell by the title, there's a siege going on. Who do you think is doing the sieging? Who do you think is doing the sieging? You let me know. The sieging is actually, it's either it's either the son of the previous Baron or the nephew of the previous Baron. I'll let you take your guess which one it is. But basically, one of them is a traitor, and the other one is actually a good person. Or not a good person, but like one of them's actually not a traitor. It's just one's a traitor, one's not. So, it turns into now Will has to figure out, how do I lay siege to a castle? Which is so dope. Because it's one of those like cards are stacked against you, the landscape and how the castle is set up is protected fort as a very like fortified castle. How do you get over it? How do you get on top of the ramparts? How do you get through it? How does he get to Alice? How do they communicate? All this stuff. And in the midst of that, earlier in the book, you'll see they sent not just Alice as a reinforcement in book 5, they now sent Horace as the third reinforcement to help Will. And if you know anything if you have been keeping along, Will and Horace are very good friends. They are the tag team duo. And so it's basically, okay, how do these two guys, along with their new allies, lay siege to a castle, save Alice, stop any traitors' plans that are going on? And you also kind of see Will and Alice's relationship kind of blossom into something. And all in all, that's basically the gist of the book. And that's really the first 6 books. Book 1 and 2 are Morgrath. Book 3 and 4 are Scandia. Book 5 and 6 are Norgate, Fief, and Massendo. So it's a decent set. I think books 1 through 4 are really good. And then when he time skips in 5 and 6, it's like, what just happened? How did Will become a ranger? Did anything else happen in between? Why are we now here? It's not bad. It's just kind of like a sudden, like, I've read these before and I also forgot. I was like, oh wait, he's a ranger now. What? We didn't get to see the whole like him becoming a ranger kind of thing or whatever it is, So those are the first 6 books in the series. Great reads. Great way to get you back into reading. Like after reading these, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm ready for other books too, which is a really nice feeling. I read book 7 and I just read book 8 on a plane. It was a 2.5-hour plane to Ohio and back from Ohio. So I actually read 50% of the book to Ohio and the other 50% back from Ohio. So book 9 is left and I'm kind of interested. I'm kind of excited to start it. I don't know if I'll start it today or sometime this week, but I'll let you guys know. And as usual, I think that's been enough of me rattling on. Thank you once again for listening. I appreciate you being here. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything, let me know. Comment down below, leave a like. Feel free to share it with your friends. You don't have to. Not yet, at least. We got some fun stuff coming up, though. So I'm excited for those things. But other than that, take it easy. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you next time.